Thank you everyone so much for being here. We'll discuss a topic that has become quite controversial. Shouldn't be, but yet it is, the topic of attribution. So much talk about attribution is all over LinkedIn. Everybody's teaching you life, everybody's saying there are better things out there, maybe, maybe not. I'm glad that I'm kind of following on the foothills of the previous session on media mix modeling, kind of all comes together into how do we answer the question of what actually works in marketing, right? And that's one of those ways. So I'm not here as this is not a sponsored session, just like Jim said. This is totally accidental timing because I come from the consumer side of attribution. I come from a client of CaliberMind where one of the biggest inspiring moments for this talk was when we got a new president who came on board, and we were in a very scale-up mode, 100 million, 400 million investment in us with Insight Partners. We had 300 people, and we wanted to take on the world and scale the company and have double-digit growth year over year. And the new president comes in and goes to the CMO, where do our opportunities come from? And she points the finger and he goes, oh, Nadia can answer that. And I'm thinking, that's a simple question, but it's a loaded question, because the minute you answer that question, it doesn't matter how you answer it. That's the thing, it does not matter how I would have answered that question. The next line would have been, Ken was devil die. Mm-hmm. Because the assumption that you just continue investing in what works, unfortunately, is the easiest assumption for those who are not in the world that all of us share, the world of marketing analytics, the world of data. And sometimes it becomes very challenging to get out of that framework and get these people out of that framework, right? And attribution is one of those things. But the other part that really inspired the talk that I'm here to give today was the book that I read. This is my prompt that I brought. It's a great book. It's called This is Strategy by Seth Godin. The guy's amazing. He's a New Yorker. He is very opinionated. There's strong opinions on many things, but he's also very interesting in how he approaches things that he, elaborates on. He has a book on marketing, he has a book on numbers, he has a book on strategy. And this is the other side of the same argument, right? Where he questions whether we should really measure things just for the sake of measurement. And the quote that I had from him that I highlighted is, can we find joy without strategy? Do we need to optimize every interaction or schedule every moment? Do we really need to track our exertion when we're out for a walk? I'm a die-hard Garmin fan. I track everything. I track my steps. We were out on a run this morning, for those of you who are part of the run, right? I'm like, I need to know. So, however, I also realize there's a group of people out there who cannot live the life by the numbers. Maybe they tried, because all of us have to be data-driven. All of us were hired to drive revenue. It doesn't matter what you do. Social media, you're driving revenue. Email, you're driving revenue. Everybody's driving revenue, right? But it's a very uncomfortable place for many people where this notion was born out of that place that attribution doesn't work. Like, we tried it in HubSpot, we tried it with Google Ads, and it just doesn't tell the story. And in all fairness, this came out of that, right? Nothing works anymore. Everything is dead. Attribution is dead. Email is dead. SEO is dead. Like, our jobs dead? Like, why are we showing up to work? Like, why are we doing the definition of insanity? Applying the same approaches where it doesn't work. And I think I actually have a hypothesis on this. I don't think that everything is dead. I think it's a natural response to when you fail and you don't know how to do it right. And you just proclaim it dead to your boss because that's an excuse that exonerates you and allows you to go buy something else. And surely there's always someone out there who's got something else to sell to you. That's the world of software, right? And that's the silver bullet syndrome and the shiny object syndrome. But if we look at the traditional definition of attribution that actually plays into this world of all things are dead, it's attributing value, attributing dollar value to digital touch points. Now, how true is that? Like, try selling that to a sales team that every click is, $1,000. Every webinar attendee is $3,000. It's a very angled, very niche, very siloed way of looking at it. So that simplistic understanding, surely that is dead. It's not, it's not the thing anymore. Now, the biggest challenge for that is that when you're tracking clicks, and I know I'm not like breaking any, discoveries for anyone here, we're not dealing with a single person journey. We're dealing with buying committees.
We're dealing with multiple people engaging with our content. Some of them will absolutely have no influence on the decision that is made at the end, and the other ones should be doubled in terms of value that's given to their engagement because they're the ones that are part of the buying group. So then comes this concept of multi-touch attribution, like the simplistic way of thinking about that, the early days, right? We said, okay, buying committees, sure, we can accommodate for that. Now, we're gonna touch or track all the touch points along the customer journey. It's gonna be in real time. We're gonna try to match these people to accounts, and we can only do that in a digital space because everything else is difficult for the tools that rolled out this multi-touch attribution models early on, right? Think about your HubSpot, right? If HubSpot can see it, can recognize it, of course it will attribute it. If it can't, well, it didn't happen. The story again didn't stick. The salesman's like, what? I talked to that guy 5 times on the phone. I shook hands with them at an event. You're telling me that marketing drove 10 clicks and that's because, the reason that the opportunity closed? Not true. So the rift continued, right? However, the question that multi-touch attribution was brought on board to answer is, which touch points are influencing progression through the pipeline? And that is still the question today. The mechanics of doing it are different because we know we have to bring everything together. But the question that it answers is still that. What touch points are we influencing along the journey towards close one? So when the concerns came up and people said, yeah, multi-touch attribution doesn't really work for all the reasons that we just discussed, let's look at something else. Let's look at media mix modeling. That's the previous session. I had a fantastic tee up for this one, right? It's almost like saying, you had a hammer to build your house. Well, the hammer didn't work. I'm gonna sell you a drill. Because let me tell you, in 2025, nobody builds houses with hammers anymore. You need a drill to build a house, right? And where does that demonstrate this rift in understanding? Media mix modeling answers the question, how should we allocate budget for biggest ROI? It doesn't answer the same question. It's not that it's invalid, it's just a different methodology that's supposed to answer a different question, right? So it analyzes historical data, it looks at online and offline channels. You have to have, just like the previous session mentioned, at least 2 years of data. You have to have significant spend for all of this to even work. But the vendors on LinkedIn are telling us that you shouldn't do MTA, you should do MMM. Well, we know it's not the same. Well, then you have those who said, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do MMM. You should do incrementality, that's the new thing. You should absolutely replace your MTA with incrementality. Well, when we start looking at that one, say it's a circ saw now, so we abandoned the idea of the hammer because it was too manual, now we got the circ saw. Incrementality measures the lift of marketing efforts, right? It helps determine what would have happened if we did something differently. Now, in most cases, it's geo-testing, right? If I run my ads over here, I don't run my ads over there, then I can see the lift of the ads in a specific region. Now, some marketing leaders have concerns about doing incrementality because when you shut off some of the ads, the revenue that would have been generated by those ads, however much or however little, you're not generating that. So the concern about leaving the revenue on the table for the sake of understanding how your marketing is working is also a legitimate concern, right? So you have to balance all of that. But again, incrementality does not answer the question of attribution and what is influencing revenue. Most of us, especially if you're leading a marketing department or leading a team within marketing, get hired on this premise to drive revenue. CaliberMind hired me on the premise of driving revenue. You have to drive this much revenue, right? Every marketer has to do that. And in reality, we get compared to other peers within the go-to-market team. You got sales. It's easy to be in sales. Don't punch me. But they got good data. Sales got good data. You either have pipeline or you don't have pipeline. Well, that's a bad day when you don't have pipeline, right? But it's in dollars and it's very binary. When you think, I know I'm oversimplifying, but I'm trying to get to the point. Finance, the other player within the GTM team, they also have good data. It's either revenue dollars or there's no revenue dollars. Here comes marketing. We got messy data. And we got a lot of it. And we're driving engagement. So they're measuring stuff in dollars. And we're saying, over here we got clicks and likes and shares and people that came to the webinar. That's fantastic. But they're measuring stuff in dollars. The big boys are measuring stuff in dollars. So we have people that are doing content, we have people that are doing social, and we have to measure them in terms of engagement. That's their KPIs. That's what they're doing day to day. That's when they know they're doing a good job or they're not doing a good job, right? So we have to have those engagement KPIs, but we cannot speak to these teams using engagement KPIs because their world is different. So then we have the board, and the board invests money in companies and expects reports in dollars, units of revenue, right? Again, so you see the rift here. So something has to give. We have to be able to have a currency converter where we use the marketing language, at the levels of senior leadership or the board levels, where we can have a proxy to translate that to revenue. So attribution is that proxy. We take engagement and we translate that into dollars. But not every methodology or every simplistic kind of surface level tool that gives you that high level attribution analysis. Think Google Ads, think HubSpot, think Marketo. Everything has something. In many cases, a single touch, right? Not everything will be able to translate that in a way that you're trusted. And that's the big thing about attribution. People are not debating attribution. They are not aligned on trust. Because the minute the marketing leader comes to the meeting and says, we drove $2 million in revenue in the last quarter, well, the salesperson gets to the same meeting and goes, that's great. Bless your heart. I can say that I'm from a fan. Bless your heart. But we are showing only $1 million in Salesforce. Well, that's a great conversation to have because out of a sudden you discredited all of that hard work because your numbers didn't match, right? So that brings us to the point that measuring marketing impact is not the concept of who gets credit for what. It also goes back to another quote from Seth Godin, right, where it says, what you measure usually gets paid attention to because you're training that muscle of expectations. You're training people putting attention on a number, and you can track that from quarter to quarter. And what you pay attention to usually gets better because everybody's aligned. This is an alignment conversation. This is a trust conversation. This is not about who gets credit for what and how many dollars a click or a webinar visit gets. But there is another side of that. We report as marketers on quarterly basis. So I have to stand in front of the team. Well, I'll be honest, I have to be on a Zoom call, so I don't have to stand. Every quarter, and I have to report what marketing did. Well, opportunities in B2B take 12 months sometimes. In my previous role at Paid, sometimes it'd be 24 months. The worst part was when you get to that 24-month mark, and the person that you were selling into, an elected government official, loses the election. You just lost it. So they were feeding you for 24 months, and you just cannot even say what you were doing there, while the lights were on in the marketing department, right? So attribution actually helps you tell the story of what you've been up to as a team during that quarter, before any opportunity got closed, because you report on a quarterly basis. But your revenue might come in on 6-month basis, 12-month basis, or even longer. So, how do you know I'm not just pushing the point of attribution because I'm with a vendor now? Well, I'll tell you how. For this, I used a report from Benchmark, and these wonderful people were part of that report. John Miller, who I made an acquaintance with at a Pavilion event, founder of Marketo and Engage, a fantastic, super smart guy. Carrie Lou Dietrich does not need an introduction. She's the former CMO at Lassie, she's all over LinkedIn, got a lot of really smart thoughts that she shares through her newsletter on Substack. So they ran this report last year, it just came out 2 months ago, where they looked at how companies report by segment. And this was the attribution portion of the report where they said, okay, by company size, what model do companies pick, right? And anybody here got a question what inbound is? Anybody wants to know what inbound is, or you all know what inbound is?
Content, so it's fun.
I don't know what inbound is. I don't know what this means. We figured that maybe inbound, that's just the source. Like the report specifically does not pull this out. So this is the one that if we're thinking about a source, could be content to your point, right? But we know first touch, last touch, the single touch models, right? We have multi-touch. So I'll start with this really itty-bitty small segment. Multi-touch attribution, advanced people in under $5 million companies. How is that true? I think that they got whatever platform, most likely HubSpot, that has that built-in
part of the package, right? So they're saying they're doing this multi-touch, but chances are it's very simplistic digital kind of, what I can track is what my platform gives me credit for. Whether or not it's missing out events, whether or not it's missing out sales activity, that's not part of their role. They're going fast, taking names, breaking things, and trying to kind of scale fast. What's interesting here is this. In the 20 to 50 million range, you have last touch attribution. I've been a part of companies that were in that $20 million mark, and the pressure from the board is always revenue. You have to generate revenue. The market share is not a concern. You have to show more dollars coming in, right? So last touch is almost like in their mind a tipping point. What generated this opportunity? What was the last thing that got this opportunity to open? So it makes perfect sense. Very short term, what's happening immediately in the year outlook. You look at First Touch, and that's the 50 to $100 million companies. That was my previous company. We started growing it. When I started, it was 50 million. Then when I left, we were a little over 100 million. First Touch makes sense to me because they want to focus on market share. They're trying to scale, and what they want to understand is how can we find relevant audiences for the first engagement so that we can generate more awareness, more reach, more spread within those audiences. Also makes sense. But when companies mature, when the questions become, okay, everybody understands it's a team effort, it's a long journey, we want to understand what's happening along the way. Look at that. Multi-touch for 100 million plus is the only way. And then you get to 250 million, and the majority of companies use nothing but multi-touch, because in B2B, multi-touch attribution, done right, it's a buyer's journey. It's a go-to-market motion of how do we influence accounts holistically as a go-to-market team. And it's not the battle of who takes credit. It's rather what is happening before an account converts. What gives us visibility, a lens into the journey, right? So other interesting observations from this report, the top 3 metrics that people reported as primary focus for their business. Pipeline generation, of course, is number 1, right? Pipeline, number of opportunities, half of people track pipeline, the count of opportunities. Some people track MQLs. I'm not a hater on MQLs. They have a place to be, but that's a different conversation outside of the session. But look how few can track and measure cost per opportunity, pipeline conversion rate, that's your funnel, right? Marketing spend. And it's not that they don't want to do it. They lack the tools, the skill, and the resources, the team to allocate to these things because they don't measure them. However, they're important, right? If we look at how many people can actually measure marketing efficiency, the stat that really stood out to me is that half the marketers out there in the B2B space, they don't know their cost per opportunity. So they would get a new president like what I had to face, like where do opportunities come from? How much does it cost to generate new opportunity? Well, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not equipped to measure that, right? And many people are in that boat. What was really interesting, so we have this kind of half and half, then we got marketing cost per dollar of total new revenue, that's like 1/3, so 2 and 3 have no idea. And then you have that marketing cost per dollar of expansion. It's the hardest one to measure because that's essentially the customer base that you already have, and how much does it cost you to generate each additional dollar with customer marketing, where some companies do not even define customer marketing as a channel. They just bring customers to all the other things that they're generating. So what we're talking here is this lack of visibility for the CMO to stand up confidently in front of the room full of peers and say, these are all the numbers that we're doing. This is what it costs to do $1 of revenue here, $1 of revenue there. And then the question of the CMO influence and the belonging of marketing in the C-suite and all of those other things that we love to take this role of martyrdom in, right? Like everybody takes to LinkedIn and says, nobody understands marketing, but I'm so proud to be a marketer. That's great, but we are not tooling our organizations. We're not bringing people with a skill set. We are not bringing data leadership and data governance into our organization where we can do these wonderful things. Instead, we got this magic 8-ball. I actually bought a physical magic 8-ball, put it on my desk, and every time I got a question on the Zoom call, I'm like, that's my magic 8-ball, right? Kind of breaks the ice. Another thing that I wanted to mention, another side of the challenge, this comes from Scott Brinker. How many of you know Scott Brinker? That's like that crazy infographic with the 14,000 MarTech tools, and it keeps on growing. If you're not following him on LinkedIn, he's a fantastic amazing, super smart guy. I think he's with HubSpot. He's like head of their integrations ecosystem. But he puts out this report all the time. And the thing here to pay attention to is that 66% of marketers cite data integration as their main challenge. So all of those things that we talked about in terms of measurement, you physically can do that because you cannot bring all of your data in, right? Then you have all the other things, lack of skills, tool complexity, things coming at you 100 miles an hour every day. And you're like, wait, I just started the project yesterday. Today I got 5 more new ones that I got to solve for, right? It's just difficult. However, data is one of those things that keeps coming up in all of these sessions that's on everyone's mind. And the questions are like, can I collect it? Do I have resources that allow me to do that? Knowledge, tools, repository time, can I solve for complexity? And I have to tell you that there are so many different types of data from all the platforms that we use. The classic one, your CRM, your map, they were built for context. They were built for people first, right? So we got all these people, they nest into accounts. Well, in B2B, we don't really sell to people, we sell to accounts. And you have your ABM platform that shows you account level stuff, but you cannot do anything with it in your CRM, like blending the two together. And I'm giving you the simplistic example of like, just to understand the dichotomy of this, right? And then all the other tools that send, semi-structured data into whatever place you can accept it in. So the challenge is real. However, when we sit on the marketing side and we tell the story of how well we did last quarter, we just show this in a lot of cases. If we do not have the instrumentation that's needed, say, okay, over the last 6 months, this is June QBR, we had a specific account, visit the website, but we had a lot of engagement from them in the ABM platform. We invited them to a webinar that we did with a third party. They were part of our content syndication platform. They liked a lot of things on LinkedIn. And they actually downloaded something from our email. This is marketing influence, and this is why this deal closed. Okay? Now the sales team saw this journey. They said, oh, the BDR had a call. And then the salesperson sent an email. And then there was another call from sales. This was a disco, and then we sent them a gift through Sendoso. And some emails went back and forth, and then we got a meeting. Sales team did so good, right? And we cannot bring the two together for the very same reasons that I mentioned. There are data silos, 20%. This is from Scott Brinker again, right? And then the constant change and the pace of everything that's coming at you. So, like, why are we here? Why are we wondering that attribution is dead and everybody's angry and everybody wants something else? Like, I want something simple. I want that Staples button that used to be on TV, and I'm gonna push it 100 times on my desk, right? Because it is so hard to do this simple equation, revenue equals pipeline over so many clicks, where you actually incorporate things that do not include clicks, things that happen with in-person interactions. Events are back, by the way. If you haven't figured that out, if you're not doing events, like events are back, because everybody's like so tired over all of this, people wanna do events. Good luck attributing events, because it takes 6 months plus. So, to tell the marketing story of how marketing really moves the needle, we're trying to defy these 3 objections, right? Dealing with engagement, and then in this year, and then out of this year, we're hearing that all things are dead. MQLs are dead, ABM has failed, sales expects insights at scale. Well, we cannot get them to use the insights that we give them. They want that at scale, good luck. Every digital tool has their version of attribution, none of that matches. Marketing is always data rich and insights poor. We got all this stuff, but how can we tell people what to do next? Nobody tells us that, right? How do I tell all the numeric side of the story? How do I stand in front of people and just spit the numbers out like this, like I'm the calculator machine? And some marketers don't even come through the pillar of digital or demand gen or revenue marketing, right? They come through content, they come through creative, they come through PR, which makes it even more challenging to tell the numeric story. And then the last one, this one actually is something that I stole from the VP of Flexera. She was presenting at B2BMX. This one is using metrics that matter. Where she presented this framework, she said, there are all of these things that people measure. And you may have a dashboard with like 20, 30, 50 data points. Some people send a slide deck that's 50 slides long to their QBR, and nobody reads that, and they wonder, why nobody reads that? It's because it's too much. But choosing that marketing metrics that matter, could be 5, could be 3, like you just have to tell a story. That's what really matters. So imagine where the multi-touch attribution is no longer a bunch of clicks that we're trying to stitch together, but it's actually a story about a buyer's journey. all these wonderful things that the account did. So marketing looks at it and says, man, we did really good. Look at all the wonderful things that we did. Sales looks at it and goes, wow, we did also really, really good. But it's not that each team claims credit, we did it together. Now that's where you get that trust, that's where you get that symbiotic relationship where everybody sees their contribution in the analytics, and you don't have to divide and conquer. So multi-touch attribution, think about it as go-to-market intelligence, right? You're breaking data silos, you have to, because otherwise you cannot stitch it all together. You're removing the noise, because again, we don't want to be data rich. We want to be insights rich, because that's what matters. Because sales wants to know what to do. Do you think people don't want to be told what to do? I'll tell you, sales wants to be told what to do. Because there are so many things out there that their attention goes from here to there. Wouldn't it be easier if somebody just told you one thing? Hey, go do that. Hey, go check this account out. Like, I saw something there, right? Wouldn't that be nice? And then you democratize access, where it's not Nadia coming and preaching to someone saying, marketing did X, Y, Z. It's you going into whatever tool, whatever platform, could be your Salesforce, and you're looking at the same number that I'm looking at. So we're never at odds when we're reporting on how much revenue got generated, who did what. It's all together. So attribution becomes, as a notion, the tip of the iceberg, right? So that's the very top of what people are talking about. What attribution is dead? Well, is everything else dead? Is your journey dead? Like your sales doesn't want insights anymore? So when you think about the same iceberg, and I'm using this framework that CaliberMind uses, but it's a fantastic graphic because it allows me to tell the story where attribution over here is just a sliver of the whole story. You have your conversion rates, you have your funnels, that's metrics that matter, right? You have your sales insights, your account scoring, your search scoring. But if you start working backwards, like look at everything that has to happen. Your data ingested from all of the sources has to be aggregated together. You have to match leads to accounts. You have to normalize. You have to standardize. You have to deduplicate. I'm telling you the story of your tech stack. I mean, maybe you are the consumer of the output of the tech stack, right? You're dealing with the data. Like your Mops team would be the one managing all of that. Like all of this has to happen before you can tell your story. But no one wants to talk about that. There's no fun in that. We just want to, split the numbers and say that one thing is dead and the new thing is on the horizon. So ultimately, if you think, then this is, if you wanted to walk away with one thing from this presentation, if you think about attribution, and when I say attribution, I mean attribution of marketing effort to revenue as a proxy for go-to-market team alignment. Whether it's your finance, whether it's your sales, think about marketing contribution and the questions that it answers. How did we contribute to close one? Which marketing insights can sales act on? How did the channels work? What was the effectiveness of this campaign or that campaign? Does sales have clear insights into the account journey? Can BDRs act on something? Did they give them something meaningful? And can we democratize all of that? I think that's the story of the attribution, because what you measure, if you can measure it, gets paid attention to. And what you pay attention to usually gets better. That's what I have for you today.